I'll now call to order the THPRD Board of Directors meeting for December 14th, 2022. Jessica, can you please take roll?
Elisa Monteblanco.
Here.
Barbie Miner.
Here.
Alfredo Moreno.
Here.
Heidi Edwards.
Here.
Tia Ping.
I assume she's gonna come in any moment. So we're gonna get started with presentations, and we get to learn about the audit today. You're muted, Doug.
Jared, we'll do an intro.
Good evening, President Monteblanco and members of the board. I am here this evening to introduce to you Julie Fahey, the district's auditors from TKW. She will be presenting the results of the audit for the fiscal year ended June 30, 2022. Julie.
All right, thank you, Jared. So thank you for having me back tonight. It's great to see all of you, or some of you that I can see. I am here, as he said, again, I'll introduce myself, Julie Fahey, an audit partner with Talbot Cavola in Warwick, here to present the audit results for this last fiscal year for the district for June 30, 2022. So the next slide, I'll kind of do an overview. I welcome questions at any point. So we did conduct the audit. It was done remotely. I believe this was our third year going to a remote audit, and it was absolutely seamless. The district has a well-oiled finance division, and they do really well with conducting the remote audit. We use safe, encrypted file technique by which to exchange information between the district and ourselves using a certain service for that. So we did conduct interim field work for 1 week in May, and we did go back. And when I say go back, in my mind, I'm used to the days that we were on site, but we did have a couple weeks of field work in October as well to conclude the audit. We did issue the financial statements as of November 30th, is the date of our independent auditor's report. Just a couple overview is there were no new major funds for testing this year, and there was no single audit in the current year. So what that means to you, last year was the first year that the district was subject to a single audit, and meaning that they spent greater than $750,000 in federal expenditures. This year, so for 2022, the year I'm talking about, that did not occur. The year that they had the single audit was the only year that I've seen in the history of the district. And they may, going forward, they may be subject to single audit, but there was not one this year during 2022. The district also implemented GASB statement number 87 for leases. So governmental accounting standards boards put out new pronouncements every year. They had a new one. It was a big one. It had been delayed for a few years. It was effective this year. Jared did a fabulous job of implementing this lease standard. It was not easy, I will say. He had to review various contracts and agreements, go through the terms, and produce those schedules to be essentially a high-level overview is took information that was previously in no disclosures or not recorded at all, and now we're expected to record them in the statement of net position. He did a great job of doing that. He had to assess, I believe, 2 leases and the 19 lessor agreements that the district has. So well done on that. The next slide is our audit results. So out of, hopefully you've had this, I know it was in the board packet, but this 118-page document, there's only 2 pages. While I have been through it backwards and forwards and upside down and dreaming about it in my sleep, there's only 2 documents in here that are actually mine. The first one being the independent auditor's report. This was an unmodified, clean opinion. This is what you're looking for when you have an audit. So all the intrusion and the work that we do and all the support that the district gives us, all the work that we had in interim and final field work and all follow-up, before, after, and during, we feel that the financial statements are fairly presented. So it's a good thing. It's what you're looking for when you're receiving an audit. This second report, and I believe this is on page 117, but this is the report on compliance and internal control over financial reporting in accordance with Oregon state regulations. So as the district is a governmental entity within the state of Oregon, the Secretary of State asks us to look at certain items, and those items are listed in bullet format on page 117 of the document of the financial statements. So we look at, public purchasing contract laws, Oregon budget law. If there were any non-compliance, we would report that. there was no non-compliance. So really well done. If there were any issues in internal control over financial reporting, we would report it in there as well, and we had none. So just well done on the district. Very, very clean audit as usual. They do a good job. So the next slide. So required communications. We did meet with the audit committee. We met with them in September as well as November. We met with them. So in September, we met with them before we had final field work. If they had any questions, kind of give them an update from interim field work. And then we met with them at the end of the audit before we issued the ACFR. They were presented the ACFR in draft form, had opportunities to review it, ask any questions, and then we issued shortly thereafter. So there are certain communications that we have, and it's in a letter format. I believe it's attached in the PDF that you have as part of your board packet tonight. But some of the highlights of that is that there were no difficulties encountered during the audit. No auditor proposed adjusting journal entries. What that means to you is during the course of our audit procedures, we didn't find any areas of the financial statements that needed to be adjusted. There were no uncorrected misstatements, no disagreements with management. We're not aware of any consultations with other accountants. And our letter also communicates upcoming GASB standards. So the GASB, as you know, I assume as well as the FASB, but the GASB loves to stay busy, always issuing new pronouncements. And so a couple ones that are going to be applicable for fiscal year 23 will be evaluated by the district and ourselves in this upcoming audit. But those are just to bring them to your attention. They're included in the letter. So that kind of is an overview of the audit. It went really well. I believe that the district, they have received 17 certificates of achievement from GFOA, so Government Finance Officers Association. They've received 17 of them. I know that they will submit this ACFR, and I have no doubt it will be awarded for their 18th. So really well done to them. And then at this point in my presentation, I just like to express the appreciation to the district, the finance team. They do a great job of supporting us. The district, the audit is pretty involved, takes quite a bit of time, and we appreciate their help and support throughout the audit. Are there any questions as an overview of the document?
We have a quiet group at the start of our meeting today, but this is great. Thank you, Julie. Always appreciate your great presentation, and you always have the same news, and it's great. I love it.
Me
No
too.
surprises. Thank you.
Me too. It's nice to give good news sometimes. Right.
Yeah, if there's no questions, big thanks to Julie and everyone who was involved in this, and I'm looking for a motion.
Excellent. This is Barbie, and I would be happy to move that the Board of Directors accept the audit report on the Park District's annual comprehensive financial report for fiscal year ended June 30th, 2022.
This is Tia. I'll second.
Jumping ahead, sorry.
Alfredo Moreno,
Yes.
Heidi Edwards,
Yes.
Tia Ping,
Yes.
Barbie Minor,
Yes.
Felicita Monteblanco.
Yes, thank you, Jessica. And thank you, Julie, for joining us this evening. Very much appreciated. Next up, we have a TV Highway Public Transit presentation. I'm sure we all have opinions about TV Highway, so excited about this one. Welcome.
Yes, we have Bernadette Lee, Community Affairs Coordinator with TriMed, to provide the presentation.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to share a little bit about this project. I am a Community Affairs Coordinator at TriMet, and my team supports capital improvement projects from early concept design through construction. So I'm excited to be here and share with you about this project. Next slide, please. So there are two parts to this project. There is the public transit planning component, and then the project is also looking to develop an equitable development strategy. So the transit project is currently led by Metro and will transition to TriMet if this project moves into additional or future stages. The purpose of the transit project is to improve speed, reliability, accessibility, and safety for transit riders on TV Highway, in particular communities of color and low-income communities. The second part of the project is an equitable development strategy, which is being created in partnership between Metro community organizations and community members. This is an effort to identify actions needed to proceed or accompany transportation investments that can address the potential for increased land values and displacement of existing residents and businesses along the highway. Next slide, please. So we are studying the entire length of the Line 57, and we're in the process of really determining what the transit project could look like. The Line 57 currently runs from the Beaverton Transit Center along TV Highway all the way out to Forest Grove, where it ends at 19th and B Street and turns around and comes back to Beaverton. The last time Metro led major planning along the corridor was for the Get Moving 2020 ballot initiative that did not pass that year. But in Get Moving 2020, there were several projects identified along TV Highway, including bus rapid transit for the Line 57. Next slide, please. So since we're very early in the transit project, we aren't exactly sure what the final project will look like. But in this current phase, we are producing a concept design or a locally preferred alternative. In this phase, we look at developing the route, the stops, the terminus, so the start and end point for investment, and the mode, which is already decided as bus based on that Get Moving 2020 work that was previously completed. Although stops are identified in this stage, they will continue to be refined in future planning. And then this project is focused on those spaces at or near transit. It is not looking to rebuild or redesign the full roadway. So it's really focused on spot improvements around transit. And this is a picture on the right of TriMet's FX2 division. This is our first frequent express or bus rapid transit service in our service area. And it is located starting downtown. It runs across the Tillicum Bridge and out Division Street to Gresham, and it just started revenue service this fall. It is an example of what TV Highway could look like. Next slide, please. There are some challenges when we look at transit investments along this corridor. There are many needs, sharing a very limited amount of space. So there's people walking, rolling. There's buses, there's trucks, freight trains, and personal vehicles all in this space. The railroad and the existing development limit the design options. The railroad is quite close to the road and to the bus stops, as well as there's development built right up to the sidewalk edge in some locations. The corridor is quite long. So we're studying, the area that we're studying is 16.6 miles long. And then federal funding rules dictate the initial project size. So there is a cap on the potential grant size that we can apply for. Next slide, please. A little bit more about the equitable development strategy. So this, as I mentioned before, this is a community-led effort to identify actions that can proceed or accompany the transportation investments. This process is leaning on lessons that Metro learned during the Southwest Corridor Equitable Development Strategy. That was a strategy that developed when they were studying Southwest Corridor transit improvements. And in the, we can go to the next slide. There is, these are all of the community organizations that are participating in the development of the Equitable Development Strategy. And they are part of the Equity Coalition who is developing that strategy. Next slide, please. So the grant that is funding this work is called a HOPE grant that Metro received, and this is the schedule for the work. The goal is to come to a locally preferred alternative for the transit project by summer 2023, as well as an equitable development strategy around that same time. And with public engagement throughout the process. Next slide, please. So a few ways to engage and stay informed through this process. Metro has a project webpage, and there is a link where you can sign up for project email newsletters. The Equitable Development Strategy group will be hosting workshops in March and June, and then we will be asking for community feedback on the transit project this spring. And next slide. And with that, does anybody have any questions?
Thank you. Oh, go ahead, Heidi.
Just for clarification, thank you, Bernadette. This is such important work that you're doing. So it's focused on the transit. I am curious, is there consideration then as well to, we know that there's a lack of crossing opportunities, crosswalk opportunities for folks. Is that included in this, and what the grant and what, you know, could be funded?
Yes, so this work is looking at crossings to transit.
Okay,
So
great.
definitely we're looking at improving safety for people accessing transit and while they're at the transit stop.
And so potentially that could mean new opportunities for crossing across TV highway to get to transit then.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
That's
Both,
great news.
yes, so it could be both crossings, and then also if in locations where there might be a signalized crossing nearby, but there's a little bit of sidewalk gap between the current crossing and where the bus stop would be, the designers are also exploring sidewalk gaps, filling in those sidewalk gaps.
Great, thank you.
Great question, Heidi. Tia, your hand went down. So was that your question?
That was exactly my question. I know TV highway, we have a lot of some particularly dangerous spots. So I was just seeing if bringing in transit would help address some of that stuff and if that was on the radar, which it sounds like it is, which is wonderful.
Heidi, do you have another question? You good? Well, thank you, Bernadette. This was really interesting. And yeah, I mean, as you can see, we're passionate about access and safety. And so, yeah, if there's ways we can help, I mean, at minimum, we can, you know, promote these opportunities to give feedback. You know, looking at your list of partners, you have all the ones that you should, are culturally specific organizations. So thanks so much for your work and stay in touch.
Of course. Thank you for your time tonight. Have a great night.
Next up, we have audience time scheduled, but it sounds like we didn't get anyone to sign up. If you're listening, the opportunity to utilize audience time, please sign up to do that. Next up, we have board time and committee liaison assignments. Who would like to go first? Oh, the enthusiast. Y'all, Tia, go ahead.
I can go. Nature and Trails met last week. And so it was a kind of bittersweet moment because I guess this is going to be the highest turnover that they've ever experienced in terms of old board members or advisory committee members leaving and new onboarding ones coming on. So, and we're losing some that have been on for a really long time. So it was kind of bittersweet to have their last meetings. But they went over all the things that they've accomplished, which was wonderful. They were able to still do work, and they reviewed the comprehensive plan and gave a lot of feedback on different wordings and stuff. So it's really great to kind of have a second or fourth, fifth pair of eyes to read that to make sure that the public will understand it and that, you know, they'll have the same kind of questions that somebody reading it for the first time would have too. So that was really wonderful. We had a presentation of safety services, and they had many accolades to talk about all the things that our safety services are doing to better connect with our public. So that was wonderful. And then we had elections for a new chair and secretary, and yeah, that's about it. Oh, and then they were talking about like what the best highlights of being on the advisory committee was, and it was field trips was one of them, and they loved, like, one of them was going to like Newt Day, which they loved, and so, and I know Felicia has a huge heart for Newt Day. So, but yeah, so it'd be interesting to, if, I don't know, maybe other committees want to also increase their field trip. That was a big hit apparently. So yeah.
I mean, this team knows we love field trips, so everyone loves field trips, except for the people who have to organize it, to be fair. Who else would like to share? Thank you, Tina. Alfredo.
Thank you very much. Wanted to amplify a campaign that's going on with Tualatin Hills Park Foundation called Splash for Life. And what the foundation is trying to do is raise $75,000 to give 440 students ages 5 to 11 free swim lessons. So that campaign is going to be active through the winter, December through February, and I really wanted to thank the district staff for kind of interweaving that campaign into its emails and other communications, and I think it's a great way to help kind of bridge a gap that's been exacerbated during the pandemic of swim lessons, particularly from those who don't have really a lot of other options. So excited to take part there. And Eileen, if you're watching, I promise I'm going to be rallying all my friends and folks in my network soon. Also wanted to give a quick shout out to on the Parks and Facilities Advisory Committee side. We said goodbye to our chair, Carl Nelson, who's jumping over to Nature and Trails for a little change of scenery, and voted to have Nisha George be the new chair. And I've said it before, but I'm just always impressed by the volunteers on these committees who are spending their evenings and giving such thorough and thoughtful analysis and feedback from all the things that the district has to share. So really inspiring work that they all do. So I'm looking forward to seeing that group carry on. So I think that's it for me.
Thank you, Alfredo. Katie?
Yes, and I'm going to echo Alfredo with the jump on board and be a lifesaver and helping get kids back into the pool for the Swim for Life fundraising opportunity. The other cool thing about that program is that students will receive 10 free swim lessons and a life jacket, which is very, very exciting. So I hope everybody will join me in becoming one of the lifesavers, either via social media, emails out to friends, talking to folks that you know to participate. Other update I have is I was participating in the audit committee. So you got a full report from Julie about that tonight. Just want to commend Julie and Jared in your first full year with us in your role. Thank you for all of your leadership and your team's work with the audit. So kudos, and have spent a few hours doing some of the online trainings that the Special Service District of Oregon has for us as board members and managers. Really, really interesting information. I'm just thinking, I wish I had done it in my first year, because I'm learning so much stuff, stuff that I've learned over the years on the board, but just really amazing training opportunities through SDAO. So that's it for me.
Thank you so much for doing that, Heidi. Very, very much appreciate that. I know that takes time, and apologies. We should have recognized your leadership on the audit committee. Thank you for doing that work very much to get us to this point. Barbie, no pressure? No? Okay. I'll just quickly share that I got to attend the grand opening, but open house for the Estuary Center, who now has a new home at Garden Home, and they work to serve. I wrote something down and I clearly didn't write it correctly, but they serve individuals impacted by autism, and it was wonderful and warm and thoughtful. And there are all these connections with the district, and I'm just so excited to have them as part of our community. So if you haven't had the chance to learn about that organization, I encourage you to do so. And with that, next up, we have consent agenda.
Well, I would like to make a a motion. I move that the board approve the consent agenda as submitted.
This is Tia. I'll second.
Barbie Minor,
Yes.
Heidi Edwards. Oops, did we lose Heidi?
She's here. She's muted, but maybe she had to step away.
Yeah, maybe
Okay.
she got frozen.
Tia Ping,
Yes.
Alfredo Moreno,
Yes.
Felicita Monteblanco.
Yes, consent agenda still passes. Next up, we have unfinished business. And I gotta say, I'm so excited to talk about the comp plan. And I've never said that in my 5 years. So the work that's been done on this is so amazing and exciting. And I can't wait.
And
Take it away.
beautiful.
Well, we will
All
take
right.
that excitement. Thank you so much. We appreciate that. Good evening. I'm Aisha Panis, and I'm here tonight with our urban planner, Peter Swinton, to talk with you about our comprehensive plan update process and to review the ongoing project so that all of the folks can hear your feedback on the draft 2023 concept or comprehensive plan. Tonight, we're very excited to share with you the very first draft of the entire 2023 comprehensive plan, and we're also excited to hear your feedback. Please note that there are sections of this document that are not yet totally complete. Those are primarily in the where we are section. You would think that we'd be all up to date on exactly where we are, but we are still working to finalize some of the baseline data that we wanted to make sure to include in this report. So we are currently working to refine the content, and over the month of December, we're working with our partners outside the agency and stakeholders within the agency to talk about whether we've gotten this information right so that we know that we're going to be carrying out the plan appropriately in the coming years. So we would very much appreciate your feedback as we go through this plan with you, and that will help us make this plan even stronger and better able to be implemented over time. So on the next slide, Peter's going to start us off with a couple of questions.
Good evening, everyone. So during this final phase of the comp plan's development, staff are asking agency partners some specific key questions related to the plan. Tonight, staff would appreciate the board's feedback on the following 3 questions. Does the wording and sequencing of the comp plan goals, objectives, and guiding principles in draft section 3C accurately capture previous feedback from the board? Does the plan appropriately describe how the comp plan will affect future strategic plan priorities and actions? And does the board agree with the plan's recommendations and the timing associated with those activities? So to ensure that we can capture all your feedback, because those are big questions, we're going to go through each question individually, and we have some aids to guide the discussion. Next slide, please. So for question 1, that relates to the 7 comp plan goals that are listed here for your reference. Those 7 goals are welcoming and inclusive, play for everyone, accessible and safe, environmental stewardship, diversity, equity, inclusion, and access, or DEIA for short, technology and innovation, and financial sustainability. At our May 11th presentation of the draft plan goals, board members relayed that they would like staff to clarify whether goal 3 would be focused on preserving natural spaces or whether it would be more broadly address environmental sustainability and climate resiliency. Continue drawing clear internal-external distinction between goals 1 and 5, with goal 1, welcoming and inclusive, being more focused internally, and goal 5, more focused externally. And then think about ways to make safety issues more concrete throughout the plan. Based on that feedback, we renamed goal 4 environmental stewardship and assessed how the objectives and guiding principles could more directly address environmental sustainability and climate resiliency. Additionally, we addressed implementation of THPRD's forthcoming climate action plan and climate resiliency practices more directly in recommendation number 14. Staff maintained the internal-external distinction between goals 1 and 5 and used that distinction when developing recommendations. And then finally, to address safety, staff expanded on safety within the accessible and safe goals objectives and included recommendations that would ensure safety standards within district functional plans would be reviewed and updated. So with that, do you believe the wording and sequencing of these goals, objectives, and guiding principles capture the board's previous feedback?
I think the easiest way to explain what I'm thinking is yes. um, I, I saw all our conversations over the last 3+ years reflected in this document. All our values, all the things that we're passionate about, all the things that we push ourselves on, all the things that staff push back on us on. So my quick answer is yes. The sequencing, I, part of me is like, oh my God, can we do that? That when I was like looking at the, for the sequencing, can we do it that soon? So, I mean, if y'all feel like it's doable, then fantastic.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Anyone else have feedback? It was a
Okay.
really big question, Peter.
It is
Yeah.
a very big question. I mean, I don't want to sound redundant, Felicita, but I, at the risk of sounding redundant, I will say absolutely the same. I'm really blown away in terms of we have these conversations and you've taken us along on the journey, and oftentimes we have these, well, we need wordsmithing and I don't know, and we're trying to like scratch at what we mean. And to Felicita's point, it really reads. And so the synthesis that you've done to listen and react and respond, I think answer your question, yes. And so thank you for listening. Thank you for being wordsmiths. Thank you for taking action with intention. And I'm incredibly excited to see that. I can't believe this is draft 1, right? So that's the part where I'm like, wait, this is just the first draft? So yes, kudos. I know it is a big question, but that's my enthusiasm and my excitement as well.
Thank you. Well, we couldn't have gotten here without such great feedback. So I will turn it over to Aisha for question 2. Next slide,
Alright.
please.
Thank you. So question number 2 relates to whether the comp plan clearly explains how it relates to district strategic plans, and staff have provided a diagram here to illustrate the comp plan's relationship to the strategic plan. As you heard earlier, the comp plan establishes goals for the district over the next 20 years, whereas the strategic plan looks at what the district will do over the next 3 to 5 years. How the comp plan strategic plan relationship works is that the comp plan recommendations inform how the strategic plan is approached and developed by setting the broad priorities the district would like to address on an ongoing basis, and those priorities that are in the near or midterm. Though midterm recommendations are typically in the 6 to 10 years out range, they're considered because there may be projects that need to happen in the near term to lay the foundation for accomplishing those midterm recommendations in the future. The strategic plan development process, or strategic planning process, then takes those ongoing, near, and midterm recommendations and breaks them into discrete projects with budgets, milestones, and timelines. So then the strategic planning process integrates the comp plan goals, objectives, and guiding principles to inform each project's goals and evaluation metrics. So to figure out how we're achieving those, we define how we're going to measure it. The result of that strategic planning process is a strategic plan and strategic project list that is based on comp plan recommendations and informed by comp plan goals, objectives, and guiding principles. So with that explanation, do you think that this plan clearly states the relationship between the comp plan and future strategic plans?
Okay, now I get into the weeds. So I'm on page 10 and there's this lovely visual. Are you like, I like this visual here. This helps me. And I like the visual that's here helping connect like all the different plans. I'm trying to envision like what it's like for a user when we're like, oh, but in our comp plan it says this. They're like, I don't have time to read that huge document and helping them understand. So I guess, I mean, part of me says we're the wrong people to answer this question. I think we're getting there. I think visuals help me. I'm hoping my peers have better ideas. Sorry.
I think it clearly states the relationship, but yet, like Felicitas said, it's like it's in there, but like, is somebody gonna take the time to read all of that stuff? But how do you do that? I don't know. Like, yeah. So yes, the answer is yes. Does it clearly state it? Will somebody have to read a book for it? Definitely, but theoretically, I mean, you can't, if you want to know the comp plan, I'm assuming that you want to like know everything and that we're going to be doing and how we're going to do it. So it's not really a one-sheeter that we could just be like, here's our vision and here's how we're going to get there and here's what we're going to do in 20 years versus 5 years. And but so I think, I mean, I love this document. I think it's as clearly stated as you can do it. Maybe to make it even more like a maybe like a one-sheeter. I don't know, where people could just, it could really summarize everything, kind of like an audit letter in the beginning. But I don't know. But so to answer yes, mostly, but yes, it clearly states it. Yes. Was it?
Thank you, Tia.
Sorry, that's not helpful.
But maybe it is, because if we can't articulate it, maybe it's still not clear enough. Heidi?
I don't know if I have feedback, more of a question, if this might be, and maybe it already has been taken to our advisory committees for a bit of discussion, because I remember hearing when I was first a volunteer and then, as a board liaison on, different committees, hearing about the comp plan, strategic plan, functional plan. I don't know if that's appropriate to, maybe take it to them for some feedback as well. So that's just a question, not necessarily feedback, but just sort of thinking about, are there other folks? And maybe those aren't the folks necessarily, maybe it's more internal than that.
Well, we appreciate that. Peter has absolutely been spending some quality time with our advisory committees. I believe he was with them, one of them last night and another last week. So we agree that those are wonderful people who are engaged with our organization, that have thoughts about what the world should look like here, that we do want to get their feedback and have been seeking it through the process. I think to Tia's point about, are people going to have to read this big old book to figure out what we're doing? That is not the goal. That is not what we're trying to do. The average person is not going to spend their time in the comp plan. What we wanted to do was create a beautiful document, and I know it's subjective, but I believe this is a beautiful document that is showing to everyone, if you wanted to take a deep dive into figuring out why certain things are high priorities and going to be discussed in the strategic plan, you can get that background in this document. This document is meant to reflect a point in time of where we are as an organization. So that's that where we are section, but it's also talking about, based on where we are, based on where our values and priorities and our community's vision are leading us, we're now pointing out some areas we need to move the needle. These are where we want to work on. And we know we can't do that all next year or the year after or in the next 5 years. So we've got to break it up into chunks. This document helps break it up into chunks, but the idea is that everything we do is going to be consistent with the vision described in that comp plan. What we think people are going to spend a lot more time on, and certainly our staff are going to spend a lot of time on, is the use of our strategic plan, because that is a real, timely, topical document that says our current board says these things are important. And so that's where you're going to get into those priorities. That's where it's going to say, within the next few years, we're going to do this, this, and this, and it'll break it out. And the idea and hope that I have is that, we might even have a 2-page spread that dials out all of these things that we're going to be doing. So that's your cheat sheet. That's your, Cliff's notes of what the district's up to over the next 3 to 5 years. You can find that in that document. I hope I'm not held to that 2-page spread thing. We may need more space, but it is meant to be this helpful document that you can go right to find the information that's guiding the work of our staff over the next 3 to 5 years. I hope that's helpful.
And if I could just add on to that briefly, we actually did ask this question to both advisory committees that we met with this month. Advisory committee members, what I heard was that this relationship was pretty clear and they felt like it was pretty clearly stated in the plan. But I think, seeing it how we could get this down into, I think with someone who's going to be looking at this document, they're probably going to be engaging with the front portion of it. And so we could look at ways, I think this relationship is described in our executive summary. We could look at ways to perhaps make that description a little bit more visual, so that folks can engage with it right at the front of the document. That might be a way to accomplish that as well.
Barbie, yeah.
Yeah, just to add along to that, I mean, even taking a look at this visual here, this visual that you're sharing with us is also, just for example, like a little misleading because we don't arrive at the same end point of 5 years. So maybe even being able to show the duration that this is the depth and breadth of the vision of a 20-year versus, again, those chunks. So I too bias towards having some kind of a visual cue to just help the reader along. So everything you just said, Peter, I'm echoing.
I keep thinking about, like, in the future, as we think about an improved website, what are people actually looking for? What are their questions and how do they find it quickly and efficiently? Because people are busy. And as much as we love to read a comprehensive plan, other folks don't have that time. So, great question. And I think we can go to question 3. I hope that was helpful feedback.
Yes, thank you.
Great. Well, with question 3, that relates to the plan's 21 recommendations that are going to be provided on the following slides. From our October 12th presentation on the draft plan recommendations, the board asks staff members to make recommendation 13's language stronger and more specific, and highlight the work with disability communities within the plan. So based on that feedback, staff are proposing that recommendation 13, which is creating an equity decision-making framework, be community-led, and the resulting framework should be applied to all district processes. As for highlighting the district's work with communities experiencing disabilities, district staff have included an analysis of the district's underserved areas by ability status to highlight areas where district investments could disproportionately benefit populations experiencing disabilities. Additionally, district goals relating to communities experiencing disabilities can be found in the Play for Everyone and Accessible and Safe goal areas. So with that background, the question we're asking board members to consider over the following slides is, does the wording and sequencing of plan recommendations, is that consistent with the board's values and priorities? So next slide, please. So on each of the following slides, recommendations will be included on the left, and the proposed timing for addressing those recommendations will be on the right. Staff propose that near-term recommendations be addressed in the next 5 years, midterm in the next 6 to 10, and long-term recommendations in the 10+ time frame. These 3 recommendations have been categorized under the welcoming and inclusive goal, as they are externally facing activities that seek to make the district more responsive to and representative of our patrons. They are align the community engagement with evolving methods and best practices, update THPRD's website and registration systems, and continue to reflect our community in staff and programming. So do board members have comments on the sequencing of these goals that you're seeing here? I figure we'll probably go each slide by slide because there's a lot of them.
I think that's the best. Thanks. Barbie, did you take back your hand? Okay. Questions, concerns, timing? I gotta say, I thought midterm was more like 3 to 5. And so when I heard 6 to 10 for the website, that kind of made my heart beat a little bit faster, not in a good way. I know that is a huge lift. So I'm not naive when I say that. I guess I'd like it a little sooner than 10 years because it's probably the number one thing we hear from our patrons. But I also know that we have to work within our own capacity.
Yes, we appreciate that. I think the idea is that the 3 to 5 year plan that we're developing now, that'll have those ongoing and near term, are the things that we think we can accomplish within that time period. Right now, we're still migrating to and implementing that new Tyler Munis system, which, you know, that's got to be our top priority for systems within the district. So that's why we led to midterm for updating those systems. Because once we have the system that we're currently working on done, we'll have the capacity to take it on. This is flexible though, and we could totally see where we've gotten that done in the next 2 years. And by the time we're talking about, here's the progress we're making on this strategic plan, in the next strategic plan, that might be a more near-term thing. So we could start it sooner than 6 to 10 years. That does seem like a ways out there, but we've got 21 recommendations, and this was our best guess at how they would line out. And so just the implementation of our current system with the Tyler process is kind of why that system ended up midterm.
Thanks, Aisha. I appreciate that. Any questions from folks on 1 to 3? Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Oh, well, I was gonna, so yeah, the midterm for number 1, is there like community engagement? I mean, we're all about like reflecting the community, making sure we go out to the community and all that kind of. So for me, seeing number 1 as a midterm goal kind of confused me, because or is there a reason why we labeled that as a midterm and not like a near term or an ongoing?
I think one of the primary reasons we labeled that as a midterm is because we've done so much work updating those community engagement processes recently. So we feel like sort of the next time that we'd want to revisit that is in a sort of a wholesale way, is in that midterm timeframe. That said, there's going to be best practices that come along over time, and we want to make sure that we're capturing those. So that's definitely not going to shake out by having a midterm timing on this.
Gotcha. I guess just from like a not visual standpoint, but from like a public standpoint, if I was to read this, like it makes sense, like we've done it, we've reached our goal, like we'll revisit it again. But from this, I'm like, oh, you're putting community engagement on the back burner. Like that just doesn't look very good to say like that's a recommendation, but we're gonna do it in 6 to 10 years, I guess. So I don't know if there's a way to better word that in that like we'll keep it on a schedule or something.
Sure. Would it be like because it says update, but maybe you're talking about revisit or conduct a periodic review?
Yeah, maybe I like the periodic review because that makes it sound like, yeah. Because update means, I feel like it just looks like that's something that we have planned, but we're just going to push it in 6 to 10 years. And that just doesn't, I feel like that doesn't look that good. But yeah, like continue a periodic review of community engagement to make sure it's aligned with our current community or something. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I like that catch, Tia. Thank you. Alfredo?
Yep, I just thought it was worth underlining what Felicita had mentioned about number 2, while fully understanding your explanation, Aisha. So yes, I understand that we have to have one foot in front of the other, but I do think it is worth just highlighting that again as as much urgency as can be done, so that the user experience in the registration matches the user experience at the actual parks and facilities, which there is a gap there, I believe, right now. So anyway, I just thought it'd be worth saying that. So thank you all, though.
Sure. So one thing that I've used at a previous organization when we were developing sort of our plan was we had tier 1 activities, tier 2 and tier 3 activities. And so we kind of envision this as being the near term are our tier 1 activities. Those are the things we definitely want to accomplish within the next 3 to 5 years. The midterm would be tier 2, and how it's worked in the past at that previous agency was if we completed work on those top tier items or something dropped off and cleared some capacity, then we could bring up something from tier 2. So that's also a way that the sequencing could work, is that if we had a change in things and we could pull something up to take on in that period, it was acknowledged as kind of that next bucket of tasks that we would undertake. And so maybe that's a note that we can include, that this was came out as a higher priority and would be an item that we should consider for pulling into near term should the circumstances present themselves.
Barbie?
Yeah, I will just underscore my peers here and say that I also agree. I think also back to Tia's point, and I'm speaking on number 2 and it being 6 to 10 years, it is the number 1 thing that we do hear about, at least from my point of view and my read of the room. And so to Tia's point about optics and what the community is seeing, I am a bit concerned. We're not aligning to, again, saying that we hear you and this is what we're looking like to prioritize when we're kicking the can down the road. So I'm sure we're on slide 1 and we have 21 recommendations to get to, that this is going to be a jockeying thing of what comes off, what comes on. I would be willing to say, maybe in our next iteration or whatnot, if we have to create space for this, I would like to know what those trade-offs are so that I can make a decision to say, I would like to elevate this in prioritization in the next 3 to 5 years, being triggered by the implementation of the financial system. I respect that, but that it's explicit that this is phase 2, financial system. And then this, not that we're saying, well, the website and our registration process is going to move out for 6 to 10 years.
Thanks, Barbie. I think Heidi was next.
Number 2 is my lucky number. I don't know if it's everybody else's, but to number 2 as well. I'm just thinking we've done a lot of work, and Aisha, your team, and Holly's team, a lot of work when it comes down to the Benita and trying to create those access points to help folks through the registration process, through understanding our processes and such. Obviously not ideal with the systems we have in place now, but I'm wondering if there's a means by which to also include that maybe in number 2 as a, to frame it like continue our efforts, continue doing that ongoing, improvement of providing access, helping folks, patrons with that registration process. Again, I appreciate the work being done. I know registration technology, it takes a lot of time to implement, and but I'm thinking if there's a means by which we wanted to sort of improve the optics of that may be one means by which.
So I think I'd like to ask Holly to jump in on this, because as kind of the lead over our IS functions, which is the team that's going to be looking at website and registration, I think that she can offer some perspective on this and maybe talk about some options. Holly.
Thanks, Aisha. Really appreciate the discussion. Completely agree with the tone and the wisdom from the board. I want to just address a couple of things, particularly on number 2. Stay positive, folks, because the plan is to jump on website the minute we're done with Tyler Muniz, if not before. So we're already, while documents are kind of a point in time and sequential, they don't necessarily reflect the nuance of how we do work. So scoping work is already happening. Preparation work is already happening in terms of the documentation that we need to do to be ready for those projects. And, one idea that Aisha had that I think we might look at as a next iteration is breaking out the website update from the registration update. because remember that time frame is tied to completion. And if I had my magic 8 ball, my little magic thing, I would say we're going to have website done probably in the more near term, if not right on the line between near term and midterm, but I'm going to guess closer to the near term. And that sets the stage for the registration system update, which we will be doing a ton of work in the near term for, and we'll get done in early midterm if I had to shake the 8 ball. And the other thing I want to say on the community engagement process is hold tight, because you have a rock star community engagement staff. And so remember that number one is really speaking more to like the really formal, policy driven way that dictates our outreach for new park development. But we do, and Heidi, thank you for mentioning Sunthrow, among many other things that we do. We have a lot of non-policy directed community engagement that we're doing every day across the district to increase access to programming, events, financial aid, etc. So you're kind of talking about community engagement from a little bit like two different lanes, right? Like the formal processes that we have to follow. And I feel good about that midterm timing only because we've done such a stellar job of updating our community engagement formal practices for the new park development and new land acquisitions and things. And that is so top notch right now. It won't need a formal fine tuning until down the road, but we are always trying new strategies and upping our game on community engagement as we go.
Thank you, Holly, for adding context and enthusiasm and nuance. Tia, did you have a question?
Oh, did I have a question? No, I guess my comment is that like this. So when Holly says like, okay, maybe like I'm gonna take 6 years because that's way sooner. Like, yes, we're working on the registration system because I mean like the registration system has been like since I started and my term is already up and like we're nowhere closer to like making a better one. And I think this is like the registration system and the website has been the reason why we've elevated technology over these years, right? Because we know we need to get our technology to current day status or whatnot. But I mean, I understand that like rehauling a registration system is going to take time. And so what you said, Holly, is really helpful that we're going to be working on it so that we can implement it in time. And maybe that's the important maybe word somewhere that we need to, that this stuff will get implemented then, not that we're not working on it. Because when you first read this, it to me, it's like, well, it's in 6 to 10 years that we'll even think about the website and the registration. So it's not saying that it's something that we're already working on to get there, but and so I guess it's just like it's a first perception that came to me, and so that's kind of where my like alarms kind of went off, and I think that's for the rest of us. But obviously, like yes, like in 3 years, are we going to have a new registration system? Likely not, because we need to shop around, build something, see if we can see what already is out there, and all that kind of stuff. That takes a long time. But if you tell me like yes, midterm means like we'll implement it in 6 years, that makes me feel better than to say versus when I was thinking about it, I was like, well, we won't even get to it for another 6 to 10 years. Like that sounds terrible.
Yeah.
Aisha, I want to be mindful of time. Do you have what you need at least for the first 3?
Definitely for the first 2, I think we can come up with some things. Were there any comments on the third recommendation?
No, it's great. I think it's ongoing.
Yeah. And Felicia, if I could too, just to add a little, we have all, each of us as individuals and each of us in our work lives, and of course you have all lived through ours with the district, and that is we have gone through a pandemic. And the realities of, has time slipped? Unquestionably. But all you have to do is look around. And I think what you're hearing is we are highly motivated to move on that registration subject area. The challenge, of course, is we've got to have the finance software in place. And that is, that's a 2+. To hear your auditor say out loud, this is the 3rd audit within the pandemic. That's a wake-up call, too.
Thank you, Doug. And I think something for us to keep in mind moving forward is this document, and especially these recommendations, like we can't really add nuance, right? We can't really add an asterisk of like, oh, but we're gonna do it as soon as we can, right? So I think we should try to keep that in mind for the next ones as we discuss.
Well, I think one way we could potentially add a little bit of that nuance is there's a write-up that precedes the recommendations table. So the recommendations table as it stands, it's harder to add nuance to in order to sort of condense it down into a visually engaging format. But we can certainly mention some of that nuance in the write-up that leads to the table.
I'd also add that I think one thing that we haven't talked in great detail about is how we want to report to you on a regular basis of how we're doing implementing what's in the strategic plan. Because if we're doing that on a regular basis, and regular is to me at least every year, as we're kind of going through our budget setting process, we're going to want to have an update. It might be in conjunction with your retreat, for example, where we're saying these are the things that we made progress on. We're 50% of the way through this, we've completed this, and we'll be able to calibrate and talk with you about what are the opportunities for adding things to the next kind of work plan, because we're moving along quicker than we thought. So if we could move to the next slide, we'll talk about the next grouping of goals and recommendations. And these are the 3 recommendations that are categorized under the Play for Everyone goal. These recommendations seek to improve access to our physical amenities and programs and ensure that our offerings are responsive to the evolving needs of our patrons. So these recommendations are about ensuring that our level of service model, how we're meeting the needs of the community, is able to incorporate the factors that are relevant to our community. We also want to talk about the need for updating our programs functional plan to talk about how we determine what sort of programs to offer, how we evaluate how the programs are going, if we need to move away from something or partner with someone to deliver. That's the information that's in the programs functional plan. And then we also want to talk about how we use our recreation trends across the nation and the region to develop our program plans and prioritize what we're offering to the community. So this information is provided here for you, along with some estimated timing, and we're curious if you have any thoughts about these. I see a thumbs up. That is an efficient and effective way to provide feedback. Yay, all right. Okay, if that's the case,
We're gonna make it up to you. We're gonna make up 1, 2, 3.
We'll find another. Okay. Let's see. I'll turn it over to Peter for the next slide.
Thanks, Aisha. So these 3 recommendations have been categorized under the accessible and safe goal and are focused on ensuring that our recreation sites continue to be accessible to our community and are planned, designed, built, and maintained in such a way that our patrons feel comfortable and safe during each visit. So these recommendations are focused on reviewing and updating functional plans periodically, developing a facilities functional plan that looks at the future needs for an indoor facility and our facilities, maintaining facilities more generally, and analyzing park amenities to ensure that they are maintained and meet the needs of the communities that they serve. So do you have any feedback on these 3?
Just to provide a little bit of context for you, the facilities functional plan is something we've thought about for a little while now that we could benefit from having. And part of the reason that that is the case is that we had a statement in our 2013 comp plan that we should be building multi-purpose facilities versus a single standalone focused activity that happens in a building. So this plan would help us really talk through what a model plan or model facility would look like for us, but it also would take a hard look at the facilities we have right now. You'll notice that we've got some big ticket items that have come through for some of our buildings. We have older buildings. We have former schools that are now recreation centers. We have older technology systems within those spaces, like boilers. Not a ton of those out there in the world. We've moved into different models, and this was a conversation that Keith Watson and I were having with our HVAC techs that were talking about just how how remarkable our system is for someone working in HVAC, because they're not only dealing with a breadth of different types of facilities and systems, but the timelines that go back, that, you know, systems that were never even taught to some new HVAC technicians that are coming out. And so when we think about things like that, and we think about making investments in our buildings, do we want to continue with a system like that, or do we want to try and modernize something? At what point does it make sense to do something different versus maintaining what we've got? So it's a perspective that we've had to think about more because our buildings are aging. And so I think this facilities functional plan will take that hard look and say, this is what you have to watch out for. This is what might be your decision-making rubric for investment or doing something different. And then on that park amenity standards, an example of what we want to do with that particular recommendation can be illustrated by a park approval that you issued last month when we met. And it was that idea of, does every park we build have to have the exact same list of amenities? Is it a park if it has, is it only a park if it has a lawn? Is it only a park if it has swings? Is it only a park if it has a tennis court? And so what we're looking at is, when we're building these smaller parks across our district, especially in the newly developing areas, do they have to be the same? And maybe what we need to do is take a little bit different approach, because we've got these smaller sites that can't possibly be all things to all people. So maybe we have to take a more networked approach to it. So that's just a little bit of context for that recommendation number 9.
Wonderful. Well, I will turn it back over to Aisha for the following slide then.
All right, we're moving along. This is the 3 recommendations that are categorized under our environmental stewardship goal. These are intended to deepen our commitment to climate leadership and our efforts to protect and conserve native wildlife and high-functioning ecosystems. So these 3 are about aligning our land management practices with our values, protecting our high-functioning habitat and natural areas at our recreation sites and in places where more active recreation overlaps with the spaces, and finally to implement our climate action plan. So those are the recommendations. We've got the timing listed to the right. Are there any suggestions you'd like to share with us?
I think I feel good about these. Thank you, Aisha and Peter.
I have a question. I was
Yes.
on mute and I was talking. No, I was just wondering. So, I know one thing that came up in in the Natures and Trails was just the wording of environmental stewardship, and how that just sounded like we're just only taking care of the things that we already have, and not necessarily like investing more or thinking about climate resiliency. And so I wasn't sure if adding something to environmental stewardship would make sense. I know Holly's the wordsmith, so I don't know. That was just one of the things that I was going to bring up, because somebody was pretty saying like it's only talking about like what we already have and take care of what you have, not necessarily like investing in improving. So
Isn't that
Right.
isn't stewardship the language that we came to as a result?
yeah, we
of
did.
working
So I'm just kind of pulling out just that, which when they were saying it, I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Like I can't, so I wasn't sure if there should be like environmental stewardship and climate resiliency, or I don't know, something like a 2-worder thing, but I'm just gonna throw it out there.
Yeah, I think one way that we've gotten at what you're talking about, because there is maybe a tendency to read this and think that it's more about just caretaking the spaces we have. When we talk about protecting land, often that does mean securing that land. So acquiring more natural areas. So we do have that, I think. I think we can put that into language. It's maybe not necessarily here. We do have it in 11 where it says prioritize protecting these high functioning natural areas and habitats. So we certainly don't mean that it's simply looking at the natural areas we have now and protecting those. We constantly get requests to take a look at properties. We see public auction documents that say we're making these spaces available for purchase, and we evaluate those. We use the criteria in our natural resources functional plan, and so we are always looking for those opportunities. And I think a future bond measure, for example, would not likely go very far if we didn't have some information in there and some goals to acquire and protect more natural areas. That was a big component of people's interest in passing the last bond, and I would expect it to be a part of a future bond.
Thanks, Aisha. Any concerns, agreement, disagreement? I'm okay with the language. So appreciate feedback from folks. Okay.
All right, then Peter will take the next slide.
Thanks, Aisha. So these two recommendations are categorized under the DEIA goal and capture that internal work that THPRD must do in order to prioritize equity in district operations and decision making. So the first one is focused on creating a community-led equity decision-making framework that would look at prioritizing equity within all district processes and decisions. It sort of looks at, it would prioritize equity within how we allocate resources, make decisions towards the individual processes that sort of are the ways that we do our work on a daily basis and within our functional plans. So that one focuses there. The next focuses on investing in training for staff and making sure that we continue to enhance DEIA efforts within the district. And that comes with education, that comes with engagement, and making sure that the district is a great place to work for people from all walks of life. So with that, are there any notes that folks have on these two recommendations? I guess I would also like to say that recommendation 13 is that one that the board previously asked us to make a little stronger, and that's why we've included that community-led equity decision-making framework. I feel like that really putting community in the driver's seat is key there.
Barbie?
At the risk of being a wordsmith, when I hear your description, Peter, expanding on what efforts are, I get a little more excited and meat on the bone. This one for me, just when I hear DEI efforts, I wonder if some of what you just described in terms of education and a commitment might help further expand. I don't know, it feels a little soft to me when I just hear efforts. It's kind of like, well, we're just trying some things and not being specific. So just a thought, food for consideration. I'm not negative on this. I just wanted to offer you my feedback.
Thank you. Yeah, we can definitely look at ways to add some specificity in there while also making sure that we retain, since this is that sort of long range document, making sure that we retain that flexibility to be responsive to all the different environments that the district will work in over the coming years.
Thumbs up or concerns from anyone else? I see 3 thumbs up. That's pretty darn good. Okay, next slide.
Okay, so technology and innovation. These are our recommendations that strive to improve our service delivery and our organizational efficiency by developing the infrastructure that we need to innovate district offerings based on both qualitative and quantitative data. So these recommendations are establishing a district asset management tool. We use one currently, but we believe that we need to move into the next realm of that. And one of the things that we've done in the near term to prepare for that is the hiring of a park resource analyst. So this is the person who can help us identify what that system will look like, and we can focus on gathering data, accurate data, as we move through these other technological processes that we're moving through updates on. And so this will be a longer term goal for us, but we do have something that is functioning now. The second goal is to develop the infrastructure that would be data-driven. It would be a forward-looking decision-making tool that helps us evolve our service delivery. It would help us with community engagement, how we work with our customers, and then also the asset management that helps us make decisions. So if we better understand what we've got, we can understand what we might do differently. And if we're using this to evaluate data, hopefully we can model out what would be the most effective use of the energies that we're putting into this. So we don't know exactly what this is now, but we are knowing that we want to better track how we carry out our activities, and we want to be able to do things like dashboards to measure these activities, and show that the work we're putting in is paying off and is helping us deliver on some goals that are defined on an annual basis or a less frequent basis. So any questions about these two?
The first thing I thought of as you were describing 16 is like it's GRASP 5.0. So I think that sounds great.
It's sort of GRASP, but for other things beyond trails or parks or facilities, right? We want to
well, I can't even like in my head get it. So that's GRASP 5.0 is the best way I can make it make sense in my head. But I'm so excited y'all are thinking big like this. That's great. Love it.
Thank you. Any other thoughts? All right. Peter has the next one, and we are nearly complete. We're almost there. Thank you for sticking with us.
So here you see 3 of the 5 recommendations categorized under the financial sustainability goal. These recommendations are intended to help the district position itself to fund the work outlined within the comp plan, enabling the district to achieve the goals of the Vision Action Plan and comp plan. So they are work to better integrate grants into our long-term funding strategies so that we're making sure that we're aligning funding with opportunities and can be taking advantage of those in sequence and according to our own timelines and needs. Second, ensuring that funding is available for future strategic planning. We want to make sure that those plans are funded because those are really how we're working towards implementing this vision. So we want to make sure that that's front and center, that we're keeping that that work ongoing. And then finally, creating a process for aligning departmental performance measures really looks at making sure that the things that we're measuring as our key performance goals, the key performance indicators align with the district values, so that we are producing work that builds on those values. So do folks have any notes on these? Great. Well, seeing thumbs, I will pass it to Aisha for the last slide of our recommendations.
All right. So these final 2 recommendations within the financial sustainability goal are here to ensure that we have the resources necessary to continue realizing our mission and vision long term. And so these include updating and reviewing different revenue streams so that we have a long-term financial sustainability structure that allows us to do our work. And this may be identifying new revenue streams that we have not previously contemplated. The other is to do an overall effort to update our district resource allocation model. The resource allocation model has in the past been referred to as our cost recovery model, but really it's about how we use the dollars we have to deliver the services we want the community to access. And so we've talked in the past about that current pyramid, the tier 1 through 5, that talks about what levels of subsidy we might provide to these different activities, where they should be. And things have changed for us. We've been through this pandemic. We've focused energies in different areas. We've done things like, bring about the Diversify program. We've done things like expand our fitness in the park to year round versus just summer. And those are important elements about reaching our community and providing access that haven't even really been contemplated so much in this current resource allocation model that we use. So we really do think that it's critical to match how we're spending funds and how we're subsidizing activities, and which ones do have an element that should be provided through user fees when they're more individual benefit, for example. We want to be able to do that to match up with this clear guidance we've gotten from all of you on values and priorities. So that is one element. And then again, the reviewing the revenue streams is truly about how can we maximize the funds that we're able to bring into this organization through user fees, through taxes, or through grants. How can we utilize those funds to ensure our long-term financial future? So we'll leave that there to contemplate, and happy to hear any thoughts you might like to share.
I'm really excited to say goodbye or to see the evolution of the pyramid. So it's gonna be a good day.
We will come up with some other shape, maybe rhombus or something. I don't know. We'll come up with something. A circle?
Like all equal? I don't know. I don't envy your job.
I think
yeah.
I saw that scientists discovered a new shape in the last year or two, so good look at that one as well.
All right. Perfect. Well, anything else you need from us on these 21 recommendations? I hope it's clear that we're excited. We love the comp plan. It's freaking gorgeous, and it's reflective of all the conversations we've ever had as a group, individually with staff. So just so appreciative and excited that this is our guide.
Can I
Thank you
ask
so much. Yes.
one question about financial sustainability? Is there, because it says develop strategies to monitor existing revenue streams and then identify future revenue, but it doesn't talk about like changing things that we need to change or updating things or, cutting fat and reimagining things. And I don't know where that, if that fits into 20 or if that's supposed to fit into like 18.
I think it's a comprehensive look, and we've been talking about what this project, we've kind of been defining a scope for the financial futures effort that we want to undertake, and it includes all of these things. It talks about grants, it talks about what we're currently bringing in terms of revenue and how our thoughts about subsidy have changed over time. It also talks about updating that resource allocation model. So we're looking at this as a all-encompassing sort of thing that some things would be delivered more in the near term, like these two items, some would come a little bit later, but overall it's ensuring that we are able to use the resources we have or marshal new resources to deliver to the community. And so I think there's other elements, for example, that program's functional plan that would get into like you said, trimming the fat, but it also is more a hard look at the programs we offer and that service, a service assessment model that says this program isn't serving the community the way that we used to see it serving the community. There's a project and a program life cycle, and we may be reaching the end on this particular thing. So that allows us to have the justification to step away from something, because no matter what, there's always going to be some people that love that thing, even though their numbers have dwindled and dwindled. And so we need to be able to explain that, why we would be moving away from it. So so that's a part of the whole package. And there's different elements through all these recommendations that I think get to what we deliver to the community. So I hope
Yeah,
that's
I
helpful.
guess which is perfect, which I know is our intention. I guess I just don't I don't know if there needs to be like an extra word in 20 because it just says monitoring and then identifying, developing future things. Maybe something about like updating or changing things that don't work or something like that to help that it's not just like we're finding some way to look at our thing and then we're finding new things, but in that like, yeah, we are trimming the fact we're doing everything to make it more efficient, and and find sustainable, I guess, like that everything that we're going to be doing is going to be in that way looking sustainable so that we continue to function on
Sure.
our own. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. We'll take another look at that. Thank you for the feedback. I think we may just have one more slide to talk to you about timeline. So this comprehensive plan, we've talked to you on multiple occasions, and we have at least one more visit with you to talk about this. But you know, we're doing the best. Peter is doing an incredible effort, largely producing this on his own. And the beautiful document that you reference, I want to absolutely give a special shout out to Henry Chan, our graphic designer, who's been pulling this all together. And you know, we keep finding little tweaks that we want to make, and there's definitely some chunks that still need to get inserted in there. But the two of them together have been an incredible team. It's been a joy to watch, and we're really proud of what we've been able to share with you so far. We're going to share an even better version with you, but probably not next month. It'll probably be the month after. We do intend to come to you in January to talk about the strategic plan, though. So as we're wrapping this up, we're moving full blown into strategic plan, and we'll be talking to you about how we plan on getting there with the more detailed list of tasks under each of those ongoing and near-term items. So that is our plan. And of course, it feeds into this larger picture of preparing us for having that plan for the next 20 years, developing the plan for the next 3 to 5, and ultimately becoming reaccredited with the CAPRA organization. So that is it for us tonight. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Aisha. Thank you, Peter, for all your hard work. Next up, we have the GM report.
You bet. We've got Emily Kent and Kristen Smith with us to give us an update on recreation and sports update.
Sounds good. Thanks, Doug. And good evening, members of the board. I'm Kristen Smith, Recreation Manager, and tonight I'm joined by my colleague, Emily Kent, Sports and Inclusion Manager. Really appreciate your time and the opportunity to provide you with an update on recreation events and activities, fall and winter registration numbers, as well as sports league information. So that, I will dive in, pun intended, on the next slide with highlights from our aquatics department. Big highlights from this past fall are the openings of 2 more aquatic centers. Harmon Swim Center opened on September 26th, and they will begin swim lessons and afternoon programming in January, and hoping to expand Tuesday, Thursday programming until 6 p.m. early evenings. Another big highlight is the opening of the Aloha Swim Center on November 14th after nearly 3 years of closure. The big news there was they had over 200 people participated in free open swim during the first week that the pool was open. So lots of love for that pool and that site. In addition, the Aquatic Center is returning to pre-pandemic events. They hosted the 2022 Special Olympics Regional Swimming Competition and have also resumed swimming, diving, and water polo competitions. On the next slide, I'll share our recreation events that took place this fall. So the Fall Family Fun Fest, talk about alliteration, I love it, took place at Cedar Hills Recreation Center on October 29th. They had more than 1,600 children, adults, and volunteers participating in the 3-hour event. Activities included face painting, pumpkin art, instant photo art projects, and cookie decorating. Halloween dance parties took place both at Conestoga and at the Stewart Center. This was the first dance at the Elsie Stewart Center since reopening, and the event was full with more than 50 participants and had a wait list. At Conestoga, the first Cempasúchil event and Dia de los Muertos events took place. Activities included live music, altar building, dancers, and offered food and vendors for all participants. So really well attended at that first event, and then the return of Dia de los Muertos. Continuing on the next slide is additional information about fall events. Our dive-in movies are back at Conestoga. These started in October and have taken place every other Friday in the evening. Our last one, if you missed out on them, the last one for the fall is coming up this Friday, December 16th, and then we will look at resuming these again in the new year. The second Sensory Santa event took place also at Conestoga. This is an event for families to reserve a 15-minute time slot to visit Santa in a sensory sensitive environment. So fewer sounds, fewer people, families could sign up and visit with Santa, get pictures taken by a professional photographer, and then be on their way. So really exciting. We had lots of families that said they were so thrilled to be able to participate in this. This is the only opportunity that they've ever had to get those pictures with Santa. This event, Sensory Santa, was full with more than 25 families participating, and we had more than 50 people on the wait list. So we will definitely look at expanding that next year. Our fitness department hosted a very well attended multicultural Zumba event at Cedar Hills Park. And Garden Home hosted the Afghan Community Welcome event for more than 200 community members. This event was coordinated with the Arabic House of Oregon, the Afghan Support Network, and the City of Beaverton. On our next slide, we'll move over to the Nature Center. We once again hosted the Fall Native Plant Sale with partner Sparrowhawk Native Plants. This year's event featured more than 9,000 plants, nearly 600 attendees, and raised $5,000 for Friends of the Tualatin Hills Nature Park. Another event to come back, I heard a few of you at least attended Nude Day back at the Nature Center this year, again after 3 years of closures. So over 300 people attended, and I believe we set a record this year that we also had more than 20 newts attended the actual event. So if you recall, the weather around that time of year was perfect for newts. It was cold, it was rainy, and the newts definitely came out to say, we're back, we want to be celebrated and recognized and learned about. So they definitely did that at the event this year. Also at Nude Day, something that was new this year was an exhibit on Pacific lamprey, highlighting the cultural significance of Pacific lamprey to Native tribes and incorporating Indigenous history into our Nude Day curriculum. The event also highlighted the Super Newts comic book with a storybook walk along the trails at the Tualatin Hills Nature Park. And then we also brought back our letterboxing scavenger hunt, which will remain in the park through the winter. So stop by the front desk if you're interested in participating in that. These are just a few of the handful of events and activities that took place across the district this fall. I could be here for hours if we actually talked about all the different things that we've done at our centers. So on our next slide, I want to share with you the results of fall registration, including our various classes, camps, and center activities. So you'll see here at these two graphs, this is a comparison of fall 2022, fall 2021, and then fall of 2019 pre-pandemic. This slide highlights two of the main numbers that we look at in terms of total registrations and then also revenue amounts. So you'll notice in both areas, registration and revenue, that we are trending higher this year than last year, but we are still down from pre-pandemic levels. So this is obviously positive news to show our increases over last year, but important to recognize that we are still down from 2019 levels. It's also important to note these numbers are apples to apples comparison. So meaning I've backed out the registration revenue numbers for centers that were not open in 2019 to compare those to the 2021 and 22 numbers. So overall for fall, we had a 20% increase over last year in registrations and a 31% increase in our revenue. On the next slide, I'll share information about Centro de Bienvenida and our winter registration numbers. So also heard you talk about Centro. Once again, we offered Centro this year for the 4 days prior to winter registration and really saw the benefits of offering that multi-day event. So we hosted over 96 or hosted 96 households, which is about a 12% increase over fall registration. We had 580 registrations, so a 24% increase over fall. And then we had 33 financial aid applications as well. Couple of highlights at the event. So we had 5 different languages spoken, which is always great. Spanish, Korean, Arabic, Kurdish, and Russian. So really exciting, had staff available to speak in person in Arabic and in Kurdish to patrons. And then we used our pocket talks in order to facilitate conversations in Korean and Russian. And then had several Spanish speaking staff at the event as well. Highlight of Centro de Bienvenida this year is I want to give props to Lulu Ballesteros Jones and Juan Calles. They came up with the idea to reach out to Vos Elementary and talk to them about ways that we could partner and offer a way for their families to get to the event. And so they arranged for transportation for families to be able to, we would pick up the families at the school, bring them to the event. We provided dinner for them, activities for families if the whole family came, and then assisted each of those families with registration. And one of my favorite stories is the bus driver for the event pulled up, dropped off the families and was like, wait a sec, what is this? And decided to come in. We invited them in, and they also registered for classes for themselves and their child. So a great way, again, to get the word out, as well as being able to just engage more families in our community. So then on the next slide, we have our initial winter registration numbers. So here again, we're looking at those 2 important numbers. We have winter registrations to date, and then also the revenue. One of the things that you'll see here is registrations are right on par with where they were last year at this time. So that's good, good to say that we're not slipping back at all, and we do still have those good registration numbers. If you move over to revenue, though, you'll see that our revenue is higher. I think I actually did the math while we were sitting here earlier. I think it's like 20%, yeah, 21% increase over last year in revenue. And when I took a deeper dive at this, I was like, well, that's interesting. Why did our revenue come in so much higher this year than last year? And what I found is at 2 of our sites, but particularly at the tennis center, when I looked at term by term registrations from last year to this year, the tennis center had 500 fewer registrations this year, but yet their revenue amount was about $10,000 to $20,000 more. And so I reached out to our staff at the tennis center and I was like, am I reading this correctly? Is this right? What's going on? And they said, yes, that is correct. We changed some things up this year. So in a term, our programmers always look at how many sessions we can offer. And last fall, they offered 3 sessions throughout the term. This fall, they decided to switch it up a little bit, offer 2 sessions, but the sessions are longer in length, so more weeks. That resulted in fewer registration numbers, but resulted in similar or increased, actually, much higher revenue. So it's just a really interesting story to tell. It is why we look at both of these numbers, to look at registration, look at the trends, what are we noticing, as well as to look at revenue. These are decisions and intentional things that our programmers do, is constantly looking at what's the best way to serve more people, as well as to make sure that we are being financially sustainable moving forward. So that's a little recap on the history of winter registrations and revenue. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Emily to share some information on our sports leagues.
Thank you, Kristen, and thank you, board, for having me tonight. I'm Emily Kent, the Sports and Inclusion Manager. And there we go on our next slide. I'm just going to give you an update on our sports leagues and some sports updates. One of the things with sports leagues is we look at things for a whole lifespan. So sports are for life. Sometimes you start, it's the very first thing you can engage in recreation, and sometimes it's the last thing you engage in recreation. And so when we look at registrations for programs, it is youth, high school, and adult. So you'll see basketball, volleyball, tennis, that is for all age ranges. And the reason that we do that is it gives us a really good idea of where the sports are actually trending. Our youth participants often become our high school participants who become our adult participants. So when we're looking at long-term trending, we look at everyone together as one program. So for team registrations, you'll see that the blue indicates pre-pandemic, that last fall, winter going into COVID. And then we have the 2021 of last year, and then looking into this year, 22-23. For basketball, we are slightly above where we were last year, but holding steady. And something to note for basketball is it is one of the hardest hit sports due to it being a fall winter sport. So you have heavy cold and flu season. It is an indoor sport and it's high contact. So looking at all of those things, there are definitely reasons why this sport will probably have a hard time coming back for quite some time. That is a national trend. It's a trend across. But staff has done a great job to get back those who can and are willing to participate and offering great services for them. For volleyball, we are trending just slightly below last year and coming close to pre-pandemic numbers. One of the things to note here is last year, we were able to offer a lot more volleyball options on different nights of the week because we weren't back to full programming. And going into this year, they had to condense leagues down because we're offering so much more and to get more activities in the building. And so there were some individuals who chose not to participate because their preferred night of the week was no longer available. So we noticed that mostly in our adult leagues. For tennis, we are trending up, and we have actually, for our leagues, we are above pre-pandemic levels. And it's a lot of program choices. We've talked about that a lot tonight in making those smart program choices and creating space for programs that are trending up. We've adapted to what our users are looking for coming out of the pandemic and making spaces in our facilities for those activities to happen. So tennis leagues are trending up. And then pickleball is another thing to note. Pickleball is not a league. So this is based on, you'll see your numbers are much higher in pickleball. Those are individual drop-ins at the athletic center and then court reservations at the tennis center. So you will see those numbers differentiate, but the athletic center is able to offer, and in both cases, we are well above pre-pandemic service levels. So that's a really big kudos to staff in making those spaces available and changing the programming and how they offer things to accommodate that need in the pickleball world. So overall, it's great news. We're trending right along with where we anticipated being. There's certainly some growth to do, and hoping that we can focus on that basketball and making the programs engaging and offering times that people want to come back if they're comfortable to do so. So with that, if we can go to the next slide. Kristen and I are available for any questions you may have.
Thank you so much. I mean, I can praise all day Centro, and oh my gosh, like it just keeps getting better and better. I don't know how you keep doing it. It's getting ridiculous at this point, but we're centering the community, so it's exactly what we need to be doing. And Kristen, you got a promotion. This is so exciting. I love it. Congrats.
Both Emily and I. So thank you.
Emily. Ladies killing it. I love it. Questions from my peers? What? We're kind of tired. I'm sorry.
No, there's no
I
question.
should have let you
Just
go
lots
first.
of kudoses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. If you
Amazing.
need to reach out to us, if you have any questions later on, don't hesitate to ask.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Happy holidays.
Likewise.
Thank you. You too.
Next up, we have new business, park development.
Yes, hello. I am here tonight with both Gary and Tim to talk through and continue the conversation with our park development topic. So we have a brief presentation that we are going to walk you through project development, including some of our common challenges. We're also going to provide some possible opportunities to improve our park development code within the city and county, and we want to seek your input on whether we pursue those changes or not. For now, I'm going to hand presentation to Gary, who's going to walk you through our development process in a little bit more detail.
Great. Thank you, Aisha. We can go to the next slide. So as the board may recall that we created the Park Services Division, and the division includes all the departments that help us shape a successful park, from the early planning and land acquisition through community engagement and construction, and then ultimately to the maintaining of that facility. So tonight we're going to focus on the park development, which is typically coordinated through the planning or the design and development teams, but keep in mind, it also includes members from each of the Park Services departments throughout the process to ensure that we get a successful and a vibrant park or trail at the end. So next slide, please. So development projects that we typically work on include new parks, new trails or facilities, as well as redevelopment or replacement of existing assets. And as you know, the funding of these projects comes from a variety of sources. We have our 2008 bond measure as a source that we've used in the recent past, and we've got Metro's 2019 bond. If you think about the local share program that we're using, we've also been successful in various grants, state and federal grants that help fund our projects. And then we do have our system development charges fund to help fund new development. Next slide, please. So the park and trail developments, they all start with these guiding documents. Our vision action plan helps us it guides us in our understanding of what the community's vision is. We've got our functional plans, which guide us on how to build and maintain projects. And then we have our 5-year capital improvement plan, which outlines the order of priority of funding sources for each project. Next slide, please. Here's our development timeline. It illustrates the different phases of development for a typical park or trail. The actual timeline depends on the complexity of the project, the level of community engagement that is needed, the construction season. And we establish a timeline based on the best opportunity to engage the public, which is typically spring through fall. And we also target construction in the summer months. The amount of effort that we have in the design and permitting also help determine whether the project can be completed under or just over 3 years. But you can see 3 years is the typical timeline for a development project. So what I'd like to do is I'll pass it over to Tim, and he's going to go through the next few slides with you.
All right, thank you, Gary, and good evening, everybody. As mentioned on the previous slide, the complexity of a project will influence the timeline depending on how many jurisdictions are involved in land use and building permits. We typically work with the City of Beaverton and Washington County as primary contacts for land use and building permits. If the site has natural area, this will include clean water services. If the site shares property with a school, then Beaverton School District. And if wetlands or waterways are present, we typically work with the Army Corps of Engineers and Division of State Land, which they have a joint permit application process that can take up to 9 months. For construction permits, we need a site development permit, or in the county, a grading permit, along with various building permits for structures such as for a shelter, fence, or retaining wall. We also coordinate with other service providers and utility companies for their review and approvals. As you can imagine, these projects can be quite complex and have a lot of moving parts. We're fortunate to have a great team that is skilled and dedicated to navigate projects through the approval process as efficiently as possible. Next slide, please. Now, with that said, we still run into challenges discovered at pre-application meetings when it comes to applying for land use. For example, a small play area improvement in the county may only be a type 1 land use application, but in the city, it could be a type 2 or type 3. Matter of fact, with our permanent restroom additions project, we went through a type 1 land use application in the county within 45 days, but with the city's type 3 land use application, we're not scheduled to be complete with land use until the beginning of February, when we present the Planning Commission. Our point is that a type 3 application in the city or the county is a lengthy process and can require a conditional use or a design review permit, and this adds time to the project schedule and overall costs. Next slide, please. We recently discovered that older properties in the district inherited decades ago will require a type 3 conditional land use permit in a city if we want to make any kind of improvement. For example, the dog run being proposed at Ridgewood Park will need a type 3 conditional use permit because the park did not receive one years ago when it was transferred to the district from the county. On top of this, dog runs are not an approved use in residential areas, so a second type 3 application is required. At this time, the additional application and consultant's time costs more than the installation of the 4-foot dog run fence enclosure. So these particular requirements add a layer of difficulty for the district to provide dog runs within the city limits. Next slide, please. Another challenge we'd like to share is the reality of today's construction environment. In the past 3 years, we have seen significant impacts to our development schedules and budgets due to COVID-19, inflation, labor availability, supply chains, shortages, and severe weather. Staff have found ways to navigate around these challenges. For example, with a permanent restroom additions project that the board authorized tonight to purchase the prefabricated restroom kits. This will help lower the costs, lower the district's overall costs, secure materials, and expedite design and fabrication so restroom kits will arrive on schedule for construction in time to meet the grant timeline. And with that, I will pass it back to Gary.
Thank you, Tim. If we can go to the next slide. There you go. Thank you. So we want to acknowledge that we've built some great relationships with our partner agencies, and we collaborate with them on a regular basis. They help us find solutions, and we help them find solutions and projects that they need to work with us on. A good example is in the recent years when we had our bond passed, there was a requirement to bond a project from a bank, get a bond from a bank or an insurance agency. And what we found is that we could collaborate with the city, and we did an IGA with the city, the county, and Clean Water Services. And to meet what they needed, they just wanted to know that the project was funded. So we came up with an IGA that we would create a letter of commitment for each project to each jurisdiction. What it did is it met their requirements, but it saved us a lot of money and a lot of time that we didn't have to go bond all those millions of dollars worth of construction that we were going through. So it's just a good example of the open collaboration that we have with these agencies and finding a solution where we can align our goals. Now, as we continue to work on development or redevelopment of a project or a site, we do see some opportunities that we feel would help improve the process. So if we can go to the next slide. Many of the challenges that we've discussed tonight will take time and effort with our partners to adjust development codes. In fact, that will require our partners to allocate staff time and resources to make these revisions. And with that said, though, we do believe code adjustments will streamline the review process to help us deliver our projects more efficiently to the community and to save taxpayers money at the end. So here are a few areas that we recommend to focus on. The first here is to collaborate with the city to simplify the land use process if we can. We'd like to see a new or an existing park that we are developing stay within a type 1 or a type 2 process. And in addition, we'd also like to see if we have a smaller or an interim park improvement, we'd like to see those go through an easier land use process and permitting process that more fits the minimal development that we're proposing. And we recognize this will require the city to reevaluate their codes related to residential zones. The second one there is to collaborate with the city to recognize dog parks and dog runs as an allowable and common amenity amenity in parks. And the intent is to eliminate the requirement to hold a whole separate type 3 application just for that one amenity. And again, this is also going to require the city to reevaluate their codes in residential zones. And then the third is to continue to evaluate our own procurement and bidding and contracting processes to help shorten our project delivery timelines, or at least try to keep meeting them with all the challenges we've been having with the industry shortages. But to also still encourage the minority, women, and emerging small business companies to have opportunities to work with us at the same time. So if we can go to the next slide, that concludes our presentation. But as Aisha mentioned, we would like to hear if you have any input on these development opportunities that we've discussed, and just to know that if you would support us to pursue these changes as we move forward with development.
Thank you so much, Gary and Tim. Thoughts on Gary's question?
I'll jump in. I'm fully on board. Love all of the recommendations. I think I had heard, I'm not an expert on the hoops to jump through with dog parks, but that in particular, when you're talking about the time and cost for a 4-foot dog run. So I just want to avail and say I'm perhaps might be speaking out of turn for my peers, but I think that there are relationships, and if there's a way in which the board can engage to help during this process, I know I, for one, would definitely sign up and say, yes, we want to support. I think everything you've described, it makes perfect sense.
Okay. Thank you. Great.
Yeah, I mean, exactly what Barbie said. Look forward to, these are great talking points for us, great examples. The dog run was painful to hear, and we know we need more. So we don't want to be running into the same issue, and let's learn and be better, and let's start having some conversations and being our pushy selves. With that, I think we'll move on if that's all right. Thank you, Gary and Tim, for sticking with us. We are in the home stretch, y'all. Next up, we have resolution appointing advisory committee members, and Holly's going to speak a bit to that.
Okay, I think I'm going to have the shortest presentation of the night, so hang on tight. As you know, we have 3 advisory committees. They've been mentioned many times this evening. They are incredibly impactful and do a lot of advocacy work and advice for the district. So that's programs and events, parks and facilities, and nature and trails. Every fall, we recruit for openings for our advisory committees for terms that begin in January. We had 15 openings this year, collectively across our advisory committees. We had 48 applications that we received. We're really happy with the turnout. It shows such a strong interest and activism, and I have to say, time and time again, we heard many of the same sentiments echoed in those interviews. People love THPRD, people really appreciate the services that we provide, and people really feel a strong calling for public service and wanting to be a part of helping THPRD do what we do for the community, and that is really beautiful. We did have strong promotion for our advisory committee opportunities. We publicized them on the web, on social media. We relied on our relationships with our community partners, particularly those working in community-based organizations, working with marginalized populations. We advertised in e-newsletters and in print. Altogether, it was really tough, but we did bring forward 15 candidates for your consideration for appointment to advisory committees this evening. They're an awesome group of people that truly reflect the community, but we also don't want to lose the interest and the spirit of giving from the other folks. So Melissa Markham, our volunteer services specialist, is in contact with all of our candidates, even ones that might not be appointed this evening, to let them know of other ways to get involved. And we've had emails and exchanges and are trying to find other opportunities for folks as well. So with that, I'll turn it over to you all to discuss the resolution before you and the recommendation for appointments.
Thank you so much, Holly, for all your work and thoughtfulness and promotion. Any questions, concerns? Otherwise, someone's welcome to make a motion.
I would love to make a motion, but beforehand, just very happy to hear that we have so many people interested in serving and thanking all of them. I'm really happy to hear we're going to be engaging all of those who maybe aren't appointed tonight, like you said, because volunteer service in the district is critical to the work that we do. So I'm going to move that the Board of Directors approve Resolution 2021-15, appointing the advisory committee members. Do I hear a second?
This is Barbie, and I'll second.
Thank you.
Tia Ping,
Yes.
Alfredo Moreno,
Yes.
Barbie Minor,
Yes.
Heidi Edwards,
Yes.
Felisa Monteblanco.
Yes, thank you, Jessica, so much. Last agenda item for the calendar year. Here we go. Budget committee. So I'll just quickly share our thoughts. I wrote it down, so I'm gonna read it a little bit. So one, thank you everyone for reading the applications and helping us narrow down the finalists to interview. Thank you to Barbie, Doug, and Jared. The four of us had chats with 4 candidates. And we worked to find the balance of technical expertise and user perspective. And we knew that on the budget committee currently, we have a lot of that technical expertise. So trying to find that balance and keeping that in mind in who we are recommending today. Ultimately, 2 individuals really stood out for their thoughtful questions and their answers, as well as their passion for the district. So Barbie and I would like to nominate the following 2 applicants, Karen and Jonathan Casino. We think they are the strongest candidates, and happy to answer any questions or concerns. Or we can entertain a motion.
I'm just giving time, but it sounds like we're ready. So this is Tia. I move that the Board of Directors approve Resolution 2022-16, appointing Carolyn Wee and Jonathan Casino to the THPRD budget committees, each for a term of 3 years.
And this is Alfredo. I'll second.
Heidi Edwards,
Yes.
Barbie Minor,
Yes.
Alfredo Moreno,
Yes.
Tia Ping,
Yes.
Felisa Monteblanco.
Yes. And with that, happy holidays. Thank you everyone for your work. Stay safe, stay warm. See you in the new year. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.